This is Iceland. It has something for everyone from breathtaking views, cozy hot springs, wildlife, mountains, glaciers, and waterfalls. I spent the year planning the perfect trip to Iceland and went in September 2022. I spent 11 days in Iceland, and it was a trip of a lifetime. You know, it wasn't perfect, but that's what creates great memories. During our trip, we drove all around the island in our campervan along the famous Ring Road, making additional stops in the Highlands and West Fjords as well. In this video, I wanted to share the best trip we've ever been on, showcasing popular locations, hidden gems, and giving you some inspiration as well. So, here was my 11 days in Iceland. The best way to see Iceland is by personal car. The most important tip I could give to you is to book your rental as soon as you can. I had booked my 4x4 campervan 10 months in advance and was actually quite limited in choices and had to go through several companies. Regardless, you have options of a car or campervan and 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive options. Things to think about when choosing your car would be your budget, desired comfort, availability of rentals, your choice of accommodation, and desired locations to go to. Conventional cars will be the cheapest option and better on gas, but a campervan saves on accommodation but is less comfy. Between 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive cars, it's important to think about where your destinations will be. There are specific roads in Iceland called F-roads, which are generally gravel and rock roads that require an all-wheel drive vehicle by law. If you are planning to stick to the ring road and other major roads, then a 2-wheel drive car should be fine, but we found the best places only accessible by F-roads. In addition, there are several roads in Iceland that are not considered F-roads that were quite rough, and with changing weather conditions, it would give you peace of mind to have an all-wheel drive vehicle to avoid being stuck or worse. On our trip, we went with a 4-wheel drive campervan as we wanted to explore the Highlands and West Fjords. Lastly, if you do plan to do an extensive Highland adventure, and if budget and availability permits, I would recommend renting a vehicle designed for river crossings. More on this later. Overall, we spent a whopping 4,700 Canadian on our rental. For accommodation, you have options of camping at sites in your tent or vehicle, Airbnbs, and guest houses. We generally stayed at campsites in our campervan, but spent 2 nights in Airbnbs as well. Cost of campsites can range from 1,000 to 4,000 ISK per person, and the majority of them took card, but there was one site in the West Fjords that only took cash. Generally, when you arrive, you'll pay at the main office, but occasionally the owners will come by in the early evening to collect payment. In terms of facilities, I would say the majority of the campsites had showers and were really clean and well maintained. Lastly, I would say most of the campsites had laundry services, but for an additional fee. Finally, always check travel resources to ensure your planned route is safe and open, as weather in Iceland can change really quickly. I listed some popular and useful resources below. After landing in Keflavik, our first official stop is the capital city of Reykjavik. We decided to park our van in a lot and explore the city by foot, as the main places aren't too far apart, so walking is definitely possible. However, there are some e-scooters to rent as well. I'd planned a few key things to check out on the city, so we ended up walking in a big circle, taking stops at the famous church, the Phallic Museum, and checking out the Sun Voyager sculpture and Opera House as well. We also had to make some pit stops in souvenir stores, the Hand Knitting Association store, and of course, Iceland's famous hot dogs. Aside from the street hot dogs, we enjoyed dinner at Apotek, tried Sea Baron's famous lobster biz soup, and had many bakeries as well, with Brod & Co. being our favorite. After a long day, we got back into our campervan and drove about 40 minutes out of the city to get an early start for day 2. On day 2, we woke up super early to take the 3K one-way hike into the Thermal River. I'll list the name below. This is a natural hot spring river with beautiful views along the way. The hot spring is often super popular, so we decided to start our hike around 6 a.m. and had the whole river to ourselves. However, when we left around 7:30 a.m., we saw loads of people hiking in, so if you want to avoid the crowds, I'd recommend coming in early. The hike itself had many steep hills to start, but levels out later on with rewarding views of waterfalls, cliff sides, and rivers. Overall, this was in our top 5 places to see, so this is the must go. Next, we stopped for lunch at Friðheimar. This was for sure our favorite place to eat in Iceland. The bread and tomato soup was ridiculously good, and was all you can eat. The restaurant itself is famous for their delicious tomatoes grown in-house, as the restaurant doubles as a greenhouse as well. If you love some good food, then you definitely have to try this place. Just make sure you book far in advance. Our next stop for the day was the famous Gullfoss. Overall, this was something I would honestly probably skip next time, as the other waterfalls in Iceland were just as nice with far less people. Our final stop for the day was the Geysir. Overall, nothing too... I don't know what she's doing there. Overall, a nice little stop, but nothing too crazy. After a quick moment, we finished off and headed to our campsite for the night to get an early start for the next day. On day 3, we got a quick bite and started the long drive into the Highlands to Kerlingarfjöll. We had got to the initial transition from smooth cement roads into rough gravel, and already the views were amazing and kept on getting better. About halfway to Kerlingarfjöll, there's a large glacial lake called Hvítárvatn. To get here, follow the F road and take a left into the side road. Drive along this road until you reach a large triangular house for spectacular views of the most still lake I've ever seen. The water itself flows from the nearby glacier that can be seen from a distance, and Iceland is known for their clean water, so you know I had to take a sip. Traveling back on the main road, we continued towards our destination. As you approach this area, the roads definitely get much more rough, with roads mainly composed of rocks, large and small. The GPS will likely take you to the campsite area, which was under construction in 2022, so continue up the large hill to get to the start of the hike. One of my favorite little gems from this trip was this horseshoe bend, only visible during this section of the drive, located on the right side when driving towards Kerlingarfjöll. Finally, after a long drive, we made it to Kerlingarfjöll. This was probably our favorite place in Iceland, as the hike had everything from small snowfields, mountaintops, and the smell of rotten eggs. Footage really doesn't do this place justice, as it was absolutely breathtaking. The hike itself was about a 5-kilometer round trip, and I would recommend taking the right side of the loop, as it begins very steep and is quite challenging, but is mainly flat and downhill the rest of the way. After a rewarding hike, we got back into the van and made a straight drive back to our original campsite. Another early day in Iceland, and we set out for Haifoss. Haifoss is Iceland's 4th highest waterfall, and the views were spectacular. To get here, you will need to go through an F-road, however it was fairly smooth and not too rocky. We continued back into the Highlands, making a stop at this beautiful canyon. This was a place I was really excited for, as the canyon looks like it's from another planet. On the way into Landmannalaugar, we took a pit stop at one of Iceland's cratered lakes, formed in 871, Bláhylur. I honestly can't stress how amazing it was just driving through the Highlands. Seeing countless mountains and endless road, it was a treat in itself. Our last stop and home for the night was Landmannalaugar. This is one of the most popular destinations and a waypoint for multi-day hikes through the Highlands. There's a good variety of hikes in this area, so choose according to your level of fitness and time. If you're unsure, the information desk at the main site is super helpful. I opted for something with a high view and wasn't disappointed. Overall, half a day here truly isn't enough, and I would need to come back here again to really take it all in. We set out early in the morning and made our way to our first stop of the day, Seljalandsfoss. This was a major attraction with loads of people, and there was a parking fee. However, for this waterfall, definitely get your waterproof gear on, as you'll get soaked. Even with the crowds, the waterfall was amazing, and the chance to walk under and behind it was spectacular. A bonus gem here is also a waterfall tucked inside a cave to the right, so make sure you don't miss this one as well. After drying off, we made our way to our next stop, which was possibly Iceland's most famous waterfall, Skógafoss. Again, there were large crowds, but the closer you get to the falls, the less people, although be prepared to get soaked. Our last stop for the day was Dyrhólaey. This is a natural stone arch on the shores of Iceland. The stone arches were beautiful, but I would argue the backside of the hilltop had some stunning views of the beach and distant mountains as well. And with that, it put an end to day 5. Our first stop for the day is this really hard to pronounce place, or famously known as the Yoda Cave. You are able to drive along a dirt path to pull up right next to the cave. However, the scenic hike up and around features some beautiful scenery with endless fields, sheep, Arctic foxes, and of course, a famous Viking burial. The hike itself honestly wasn't too strenuous and was also one of my favorites. Moving further along the southeast coast, we made our way to this picturesque canyon. The canyon drops down 100 meters and features a beautiful river flowing through it. You're definitely able to hike up and along the walls of the canyon, but we opted to take some videos and photos just near the front. Our last stop for the day was Diamond Beach and the Glacier Lagoon. Diamond Beach is a beautiful black sand beach famous for having chunks of icebergs decorating its shores. Unfortunately, the day we went, we didn't have too many large chunks, but I was happy to see a couple. Across the street is the Glacier Lagoon. The parking lot here is busy, so I would actually park at Diamond Beach and just walk across. It was actually pretty fun just watching the icebergs float around and catching the occasional glimpse of seals floating in and out of the water. There's also some cool opportunities to kayak in the lagoon, and if I had more time, I definitely would have tried this out. And with that, we wrapped up our day and settled in for the night. Overnight, we camped at the Viking Cafe near Vestrahorn, hoping to catch beautiful views of the shore and mountains in the morning. When we got up, we were greeted with a thick coverage of fog. Regardless, I tried to take a peek and had no luck. Disappointed, but not defeated, we packed up our things and drove onwards throughout the mountains to our next stop. Driving on the east coast and moving up north, I took a route through a mountainous area that was pretty paved, but due to the thick fog, I had to drive pretty carefully here. Making it out of the fog and into sunny weather, we arrived at our first stop of the day, Hengifoss. This was something I really want to see, as the red walls surrounding the waterfall made for some stunning views. The hike up to the waterfall was all uphill, and it was actually pretty tiring. However, the sights at the top are all worth it. Walking back down, you can either go the way you came up or take an alternate path on the right side, which I found to be a little bit more scenic, and at the bottom, you're treated to a nice little food truck with delicious goat milk ice cream and some lamb soup as well. After taking a couple hikes over the past few days, we treated ourselves to Vox baths. After trying Secret Lagoon and Sky Lagoon as well, I would honestly say that Vox baths was the best experience among all of them. The facility was super modern and featured 3 infinity tubs with varying temperatures nested along the natural lake. I often jumped into the freezing lake and hopped back into the toasty tub. In addition, there was a larger pool with rocks and places to lounge as well. If you can make it out in the east, this was definitely a must-try. Feeling refreshed, we made our way back to our campsite, putting an end to day 7. Our first and special stop for the day was Stuðlagil Canyon. Following the GPS route, it will likely take you to a parking lot just before or after the bridge. If you have a 4x4 vehicle, you can continue to park at a closer lot, cutting the hike down by about half the distance. The hike itself was actually quite level and was really easy. I wanted to get to the spot super early and be the only ones there, as I planned to have a special moment with my now fiancé. I was hoping the water would be a bit more blue or emerald color, but honestly, the canyon was still amazing and a memory we'll never forget. Continuing our way around the island, we headed northwest to Dettifoss. Getting closer, there was a road about 30 kilometers in length, and this still haunts me to this day. The road itself is actually quite flat and rocky with some gravel, but it was so bumpy and rocky that you would just vibrate in the car the whole time. Due to the conditions, I ended up driving about 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, with most cars doing the same. If you have a more equipped car, you'll likely speed through this, but in our campervan, it was a rough time, literally. After being mentally tested, we finally made it to Dettifoss, which is Europe's most powerful waterfall, and also featured in the opening scene of Prometheus. There are two general viewpoints of the falls depending on the road you take in, each offering amazing views. We had originally planned to see Krafla, another crater lake, and Verfell, a large crater nearby, but due to time, we decided to continue our drive across the northern part of the island. One quick stop I did plan was to take a quick shower at the showerhead located in the middle of nowhere. It is fully functioning, and when we arrived it was empty, so I stripped down for a refreshing shower. It is located off the main road where a few cars do pass by, so use at your own risk. A quick but unexpected stop we took was at the Blue Lake. I'm not too sure if the watercolor is natural, but regardless, due to safety concerns you aren't allowed to go in the water, but it still offers some unique and amazing views. Another spot we had planned to see was Vitsikar. However, to get to our campsite before dark, we had to skip this one. Although we had missed a few things today, driving around the northern part of the island was really fun, and had some amazing views with changing landscapes. Plus, we caught a beautiful sunset to end the day. Finally, we enter the West Fjords. Drives in this section of Iceland take a long time to cover shorter distances, as you often have to drive around each fjord to reach your destination. However, there are a few routes that actually go over the mountain, offering some unique views, although the roads were quite rough and a 4x4 vehicle is definitely required. Our first stop of the day was a unique one, the Museum of Icelandic Sorcery and Witchcraft. We were skeptical at first, as a museum way out in the West Fjords seemed iffy, but I would say I overall enjoyed looking at some creepy artifacts and displays while learning about some witchcraft history. Our next stop was at a local hot spring located just off the side of the road. Overall, it did have some great views, but was full of moss, so if you're a little grossed out by that, I would probably skip this one. Overall, this day we didn't plan too much, as the stops took a lot of driving in between. However, I would say just driving around the mountains and along the coast, making random stops at beautiful lookouts, was the highlight of this area. One unexpected gem was this beautiful pier that I quickly Google searched during the drive. The pier itself sits above beautiful blue water overlooking the mountains, making it an amazing sight to behold. And since it's right off the main road, it makes for a great pit stop and ending to another amazing day in Iceland. Rounding out our time in the West Fjords, we started out by seeing the jewel of the West Fjords, Dynjandi, a huge waterfall nested on top of a hill. You begin your hike at the parking lot located at the bottom of the falls, and already you can spot Dynjandi in the distance. Along the way, you're greeted with some smaller waterfalls and viewpoints, and after a quick hike up, you get to be up close and personal in all its glory. Traveling further southwest, we reach Latrabeg, a beautiful cliffside famous for puffin watching. However, when we went in September, they had already left, but the views of the ocean and cliffside were still amazing. Before reaching our next destination, we are treated to what the internet called Iceland's most dangerous road. Honestly, the road itself I wouldn't say was terrifying, but weaving around 180-degree turns down the mountainside with no barriers definitely kept you focused. If you aren't afraid of heights, this was actually a fun drive, just be cautious. After descending the mountain, we arrive at our next stop, Raudasinda, or Iceland's Red Sand Beach. Upon arriving, park near the church and follow the trailhead through the grass to get to the beach. Depending on the time of the day and the weather, the water levels may alter your path. I would probably recommend trying to walk out as far as you can, as the views of the endless sand felt like you're in another world. After some amazing views, we hopped back in the van and made our way out of the West Fjords and towards our campsite for the night. On day 11, we grabbed a bite and made a quick drive down the west coast back into Reykjavík. We really wanted to spend an extra day in the capital to do some sightseeing and shopping, so we opted to skip Iceland's west side. However, we did miss out on the famous mountain Kerlingarfjöll and a hike to Glimmer Waterfall. Surprisingly, to get down to Reykjavík from the entrance of the West Fjords was a speedy 2-hour drive in total. After finishing up some last-minute sightseeing and shopping in the capital, we rounded out our trip with a much-needed dip at the Sky Lagoon. The Sky Lagoon is a beautiful hot spring located near the capital and serves as a great alternative to the Blue Lagoon. I decided to go with the Sky Lagoon as the facility seemed nicer, less crowded, and more relaxing overall, with views over the harbor, a cool pool walkout, and a 7-step relaxing ritual, and some cold plunge as well. As mentioned before, I still think Vox Baths on the East Coast was the best, but if you're in the capital, I would check this place out. And with that, we put an end to a trip of a lifetime that will truly be unforgettable. A year later, I still talk about this, and I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I definitely missed a few things in Iceland, but I'm already planning my return. If you have any questions, please leave a comment and I would be more than happy to share my experiences with you. However, if you wanted something a little bit more personal, I would love to share my more specific tips and maybe bring in my fiance to give you her perspective on each day and location as well in a different video. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video, please help me out by liking and subscribing, as I'll definitely put out more videos in the future. I'll see you on the next trip. Thanks for watching.